Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's archive presents China Urban Legends, the Tomb of Emperor Yang of Sui.
In the spring of 2004, I was transferred to work in Yangzhou and lived in a lane off Dongguan Street. I can't tell you the name of that lane. If I did, you'd be able to find it. What I can say is that it was so narrow only two people could walk side by side. On both sides stood old residences made of gray brick and small black tiles, with thick moss growing at the base of the walls. Walking in, it was cool in summer and damp in winter, and all year round there hung a smell you couldn't quite name. It was the fishy scent of canal water, the musty rot of old timber, the lingering smoke of burnt spirit money that never fully cleared.
The landlord's surname was Qian, his given name Sui, 71 years old, a born and bred Yangzhou native. He spoke a soft, glutinous Yangzhou dialect that sounded like he was humming a ditty. I called him Old Qian. Old Qian had kept watch over this old house for most of his life. He lived on the first floor himself, rented the second floor to me. There was no third floor, above the second floor were just the roof tiles. But at the end of the second floor hallway there was a small door, with a rusted shut brass lock on it, the keyhole stuffed with dust. It was clear it hadn't been opened in decades. The day I moved in, Old Qian helped me carry my luggage upstairs. When he reached that little door, he paused and said, "Xiao Yang, don't touch that room, and don't be curious about it."
I said okay, I'm not curious. He gave me a look and added, I'm not talking about that room. I mean, at night, if you hear any noise, don't answer it.
At the time I didn't take it to heart. Yangzhou, after all, an old city, full of old houses, and it's perfectly normal for wooden structures to make sounds at night. I took his words as a story old-timers use to spook outsiders and brushed it off. Today's story is what this old house told me. What that lane and that city told me. Let me start by talking about where I live.
Dongguan Street is an old street in Yangzhou. It's been around since the Tang and Song dynasties, and it was at its busiest during the Ming and Qing. Back then, boats came and went on the canal, and the salt merchants got rich and built mansions on both sides of the street. Gray bricks, dark tiles, tall gateways, stone lions squatting by the doors, and parasol trees planted in the courtyards. The house I lived in was the mansion of one of those salt merchants. Later the family fell into decline, and the house changed hands several times. After liberation it was divided up among several families, and then later they all moved away, leaving only Old Qian's family. Old Qian said his great-great-grandfather was the gatekeeper for that salt merchant. Later the master's family went broke and pawned the house to the gatekeeper, and it's been passed down this way ever since. The house follows the traditional layout of shop in front, residence in back. The three rooms facing the street were the storefront back in those days, but now they're empty, filled with Old Qian's junk. A few broken vats, a stack of moldy planks, and a 28-inch bicycle he'd been riding for 30 years. Past the shop front is the courtyard. The courtyard isn't big, paved with flagstones, with grass growing in the cracks. In the middle of the courtyard is a well, its mouth covered with a stone slab. Old Qian said the well was dug by the salt merchant back then, and the water was clear and sweet, so clear you could see your reflection in it. Later, afraid a child might fall in, they covered it up.
Good thing it's covered, Old Qian said. Otherwise someone might be lying by the edge in the middle of the night, looking in. I asked, who would lie by the edge looking in at night?
He didn't answer, just slowly walked back into the house. My room was at the west end of the second floor, facing south, with a window looking out onto the alley. The room was simply furnished, an old carved bed, a desk, a rattan chair, and a yellowed scroll of calligraphy on the wall reading "No desire, hence strength," with the signature too faded to make out. The bed was one of those old-fashioned canopy beds with railings on three sides. The bedboard had a new mattress on it, and the quilt was dried by old Qian, smelling of sunshine.
Nothing unusual happened in the first few days after I moved in. During the day I went to work. At night I came back, read, and slept. The alley was quiet. After 9 o'clock, even the dogs stopped barking. Only the occasional boat on the distant canal let out a whistle. Woo, drawn out long, like a sigh. Old Qian lived downstairs, and his routine was very regular. He got up before dawn every day, moved a little stool to the doorway, brewed a pot of tea, and watched the people come and go in the alley. By evening, he'd switch to a fresh pot of tea and sit there until dark. Then he'd close the door, turn on the light, and go to sleep. He didn't watch TV, didn't listen to the radio, he just sat there. Sometimes he'd sit all afternoon without saying a single word.
What really made me feel something was off was half a month after I moved in. That night, I was sleeping soundly when I suddenly got woken up by a noise. The noise was very faint, very muffled. One hit, then a long pause, then another. Like someone far away, using a hammer, chipping away at stone, one strike at a time. Thud, a thud, a thud, each hit was a minute or two apart, unhurried, steady as could be. I figured it was the neighbors renovating. The old houses on Dongguan Street get fixed up every now and then, and working through the night isn't unusual. I rolled over, trying to get back to sleep. But the sound was too regular, like a night watchman's clapper, hit after hit, knocking unease into my chest. I sat up and strained my ears. It wasn't next door. An old couple lived next door, and they'd been asleep for a while. It wasn't downstairs either. Old Qian went to bed early, by now he was probably snoring. I walked barefoot to the window and pushed it open. The alley was pitch black, not a single person in sight. The sound was still going. Thud, thud, the thud. Then I realized the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from under my feet, from the foundation of this old house, from somewhere even deeper, traveling up one hit at a time. I crouched down and pressed my ear to the floor. The floorboards were cold, and the dampness in the wood crept into my ear. The sound was clearer now, like someone beneath the house, through a layer of dirt, a layer of brick, a layer of something I couldn't name or explain, was chipping away at something. I lay on the floor listening for a long time, so long my knees went numb, before the sound slowly stopped. It stopped all at once, like the stonecutter had set down his hammer, straightened his back, looked up at the sky, and said, "That's enough, I'll pick it up tomorrow." The next morning when I went downstairs, old Qian was already sitting at the door, drinking tea.
I said, "Old Qian, did you hear it last night?"
He held his teacup, didn't even lift his eyelids. "Hear what?"
"Some kind of racket," I said. "Like someone chipping at stone. It was coming up from under the ground."
Old Qian set down his cup, was quiet for a moment, then asked me, "Did you answer it?"
I said no, how would I dare answer it? I didn't even dare let out a big breath. Old Qian nodded. "Good thing you didn't. If you hear it, don't answer." I asked him, "What is it? Who's chipping at stone?"
Old Qian stood up, dusted the dirt off his pants, looked toward the mouth of the alley, and said something I'd mull over for years.
"More than one city has been buried beneath this ground. The things under the city wake up every few years. When they wake, they need something to keep themselves busy. Chipping stone? That counts as the light stuff."
Old Qian didn't say much, but when it came to the stories of this city, he could talk for 3 days and 3 nights. He said that in Yangzhou, the things buried underground outnumbered the things standing on the ground. The surface was the Yangzhou of the living, beneath it was the Yangzhou of the dead, 2 stories, and neither was supposed to bother the other.
The first story he told me was about Emperor Yang of Sui. "Do you know Emperor Yang of Sui?" Old Qian asked me. I said I did, the one who went down to Jiangdu 3 times and died in Yangzhou. Old Qian nodded. Right, died right here in Yangzhou. In the 14th year of Daye, 618 AD, he came down to Jiangdu for the third time and stayed in the Jiangdu Palace in the city, refusing to leave. By then, the empire was already falling apart. His personal guards were all men from Guangzhou. They'd been away from home for 3 years and were going mad with homesickness. Their leader was a man named Yuwen Huaji, and in the middle of the night he led soldiers into the Jiangdu Palace and cornered Emperor Yang in his chambers. Emperor Yang said, "The Son of Heaven has his own way of dying. Bring me a cup of poisoned wine." But the soldiers couldn't wait. They took off their belts and strangled him to death on the spot.
After he was strangled, then what? I asked.
After he was strangled, that's when the trouble started. Old Qian took a sip of tea. The emperor was dead, and no one dared to take charge. Empress Xiao and a few palace maids tore down the lacquered bedboards in the palace, pieced them together into a makeshift coffin, gave him a hasty burial, and put him in the western courtyard of the Jiangdu Palace. That was the first grave. Later, the Jiangdu prefect Chen Lang, out of respect for him as an emperor, had him dug up again and reburied at the foot of Wugong Terrace. That was the second grave. Still later, when the Tang dynasty conquered the south and Li Shimin became emperor, another imperial edict was issued to move him to Leitang. That was the third grave. One grave, buried 3 times?
3 times. Old Qian held up 3 fingers. Think about it, a man dug up twice, his bones exposed to the sky 3 times. How could he rest easy?
He said that Leitang was north of Yangzhou city, more than 10 li from town. It used to be a stretch of ponds with locust trees planted all along the banks, so the place was also called Huaiji. Emperor Yang's grave was on the edge of the pond. The tomb wasn't big, just a mound of earth with a stone stele standing in front. The stele wasn't erected until the Jiaqing reign of the Qin dynasty. The man who put it up was named Ruan Yuan, a high official and a native of Yangzhou. He verified through research that Leitang was indeed Emperor Yang's burial site. So he repaired the tomb, erected the stele, and planted a ring of pines and cypresses around it. But Old Qian lowered his voice. After that, strange things started happening at Leitang.
What kind of strange things?
The water, Old Qian said. In that whole area around Leitang, the water used to be clear, you could drink it. Ever since Ruan Yuan put up that stele, the pond water gradually turned murky, black and foul-smelling. In the summer, it would bubble up from below, like something down there was gasping for breath. The locust trees along the bank. One would live, one would die, one would live, one would die. Over the decades, only a few crooked old locusts were left. Whenever a windy day came, they'd moan and wail, just like crying. Some people said Emperor Yang's resentment was just too heavy. In his whole life, he dug the Grand Canal, campaigned against Goguryeo, went down to Jiangdu 3 times, and when he died, he didn't even have a proper coffin, it was pieced together. He wouldn't accept it.
I said, these are all stories handed down from the old folks, right? Handed down, yes. Old Qian said, but one thing, I saw with my own eyes.
What Old Qian said he saw with his own eyes happened in 1983.
That year he was 50, working as a worker at the agricultural machinery factory in the north of the city. The factory organized people to go to Leitang to dredge the silt, that is, to dig out the mud from the pond. By that time Leitang had already become a muddy swamp, and the government wanted to turn it into a fish pond, so they had each work unit send people to do the dredging.
It was autumn that day, Old Qian said. A dozen or so of us, wearing rubber boots, stood in mud up to our waists and flung the mud out with shovels. We worked into the afternoon. When I drove my shovel down, something felt wrong, it was hard underneath. I thought I'd hit a rock, so I dug 2 more shovelfuls, and a piece of gray brick came into view. That brick was bigger than today's bricks, thicker too, with clean, sharp edges. You could tell at a glance it was an old thing. And then? Then we cleared all the mud away from that area. Underneath was an arched roof built of brick, the kind of arched ceiling, like the top of a tunnel. The foreman said stop digging, in case it collapsed and hurt someone, and went to report it to the commune. The next day a few men with glasses showed up, measuring with rulers. After measuring, they said it was an old bridge over a former river channel, or an old culvert, nothing to worry about, so we should backfill it. You backfilled it? We backfilled it, old Qian said. But before we backfilled it, I stole a look. Tucked in the brick gaps of that arched roof was something with one corner sticking out. I pried it out and looked. It was a bronze coin, mottled with green rust, with 4 characters on it, none of which I recognized.
He reached into his shirt and pulled out a cloth bundle. He opened it layer by layer, and inside there really lay a bronze coin, about the size of a thumbnail, with a square hole in the middle, green with rust, the characters in ancient seal script.
Later I found someone in the know to look at it, old Qian said. The man said it was a Wuzhou coin from the Sui Dynasty, cast during the reign of Emperor Yang of Sui.
He handed the coin to me. I took it and turned it over and over, examining it. The characters on the coin were already worn faint, but you could still make out their outlines, square and straight, with very hard strokes.
You keep it, old Qian said. This thing lay under Leitang for 1400 years. Hold on to it, you'll absorb a bit of its foundation.
I said no, I didn't want it, he was the one who dug it up. Old Qian put the coin away again and said, all right, I'll keep it for you for now. If you ever can't sleep at night and want to take a look at it, come find me.
It was only later that I came to understand what he meant by that.
I said, old Qian, do you think that arched roof under Leitang wasn't a bridge, and wasn't a culvert either? Old Qian smiled and didn't answer. After a long while, he said, Little Yang, have you ever heard of the king of Guangling? I said, Guangling? In ancient times Yangzhou was called Guangling. Right? Old Qian said. Liuzhu, the king of Guangling, was the son of Emperor Wu of Han, and his fief was here in Yangzhou. That old man, while he was alive, did just one thing. He kept a pack of witches and shamans, and every day at home they made little dolls and cursed the emperor to die. He cursed Emperor Wu of Han, then Emperor Xiao of Han, then Emperor Qian of Han, cursed his whole life. Emperor Qian of Han couldn't take it anymore and was about to arrest him. So he hanged himself. After his death, he was buried at Mount Tianshan in Gaoyu, northwest of Yangzhou. A few years ago, an archaeological team dug open his tomb, and what a sight it was. The entire tomb was made of huangchang tiku, row after row of yellow cypress logs packed densely into a wooden city, with the coffin placed at the very center. The man died 2,000 years ago, and the wood still hasn't rotted. What does that have to do with Leitang? I asked. Old Qian looked at me and said, Think about it. The king of Guangling spent his whole life cursing people, and ended up cursing himself to death, buried in Gaoyu. Emperor Yang of Sui toiled his whole life, was strangled to death, buried 3 times, and finally laid to rest at Leitang. One is a king of the Han Dynasty, the other an emperor of the Sui Dynasty, both buried in this same patch of earth in Yangzhou. Feng Shui masters say that Yangzhou is a place where the dragon coils. When the dragon coils and doesn't leave, the things accumulate. The dragon above the ground is the Grand Canal, is slender West Lake. The dragon underneath the ground. He paused, then said, The dragon underneath is them.
Them? The people buried under this earth who didn't get to leave.
My back suddenly felt a chill. Outside the window the sky was already pitch black, and wind had risen in the alley, making the wooden door of the old house creak and groan. It suddenly occurred to me, last night, that sound of chiseling stone I'd heard when I was lying on the floor.
Old Qian, I said, that commotion that night. Go to sleep, old Qian cut me off. You've got work tomorrow. In the Yangzhou night, listen little, ask little, go out little. That's the old rule.
For a while after that, I went to work during the day and came back at night, living an ordinary life. The sound of chiseling stone rang out twice more after that, both times in the middle of the night, just a few strikes each time, as if someone was knocking on a wall beneath the house, and left after finishing. I remembered old Qian's words. When I heard it, I didn't respond, just turned over and went back to sleep. What really made me ponder deeper about Yangzhou was a night excursion in May.
Some out-of-town clients came to my work unit, and the boss asked me to accompany them to tour Slender West Lake. I had been to Slender West Lake during the day. The willows swayed, the green water stretched on, the kind of Jiangnan scenery that makes you feel at ease just looking at it. But that night, the clients changed their itinerary on a whim and insisted on seeing the night views. So we took a boat, launched from the Imperial Wharf, heading toward the 24 Bridge. The night at Slender West Lake was a different world from the day. The water's surface was black, swallowing the shadows of the shore lights, trees, pavilions, and towers, with only a layer of scattered gold floating on it. The boat was a Yulo boat. The boatwoman rowed slowly. The creak of the oar went on, one after another, like someone sighing. The clients sat in the bow chatting, while I sat in the stern, staring blankly at the water. When the boat passed under 5 Pavilion Bridge, something happened. 5 Pavilion Bridge is the famous bridge on Slender West Lake, with 5 pavilions on top and 15 arch openings underneath. During the full moon, each of the 15 arches reflects a moon, a famous Yangzhou site. That day wasn't a full moon. Clouds covered the sky, and the moon appeared and disappeared. As our boat passed beneath the bridge, I heard footsteps overhead, on the bridge deck.
Talk, talk, talk. Unhurried, like someone taking a stroll on the bridge.
I didn't think much of it. Bridges at Slender West Lake still get pedestrians at night. It wasn't unusual.
But after the boat came out from under the arch, I instinctively turned back for a look. The bridge was empty, not a single person. But there was a pale blur by the railing, like a figure or a wisp of fog, leaning against the railing, facing the water, motionless. I stared at that white shadow. The boat drifted farther away, but the white shadow never moved. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. It was gone. The bridge was empty, only moonlight, only wind. I thought my eyes had played tricks on me. The clients on the boat were chatting merrily. No one was looking at the bridge. The boat reached the 24 Bridge and stopped for a while. 24 Bridge is a single-arch stone bridge, with a pavilion beside it, and a stone tablet standing inside the pavilion. I got off the boat and walked up onto the bridge. The bridge deck was narrow, paved with blue stone slabs, worn smooth and glossy. When I reached the middle of the bridge, I suddenly caught a smell, not floral, not fishy watery, but a faint, aged scent of sandalwood incense, like the incense burned for decades in an old temple, lingering in the air, refusing to dissipate. There was no one on the bridge, and the pavilion was empty too. But that sandalwood scent kept following me. Only when I reached the other end of the bridge did the wind disperse it. Back on the boat, I casually asked the boatwoman, at 24 Bridge, does someone burn incense at night? The boatwoman was a woman in her 40s. She rowed the oar and said without turning her head, no. No one comes to this bridge at night.
Then how did I smell sandalwood incense?
The boatwoman went silent. After a long moment, she said in a low voice, "Young man, don't go onto the Slender West Lake bridges much at night. Bridges are for people to walk, but also for other things to walk. Walking in the daytime, it's yours. Walking at night, you can't say whose it is."
For other things to walk?
The boatwoman didn't answer again, just rowed the oar faster. The water at the bow splashed, like someone talking.
That night, when I got back to my lodging, it was almost 11. Old Qian was still awake, sitting in the courtyard smoking. Seeing me return, he asked, "Went to night tour Slender West Lake?"
I said yes, accompanying clients. He made an sound and asked, "Run into anything on the bridge?" I was startled. how did you know I went on the bridge? Old Qian said, you have a smell of incense ashes on you.
I lowered my head and sniffed my own sleeve, but didn't smell anything.
Old Qian stubbed out his cigarette, stood up and said, the slender West Lake area was a mass burial ground before liberation. No telling how many people were buried there. Later they built the park, leveled the graves, planted trees, but the things underneath didn't leave. Bridges at night aren't for people to walk. From now on, go on the bridges less at night. The mass burial ground Lao Qian mentioned made me think of something, the 10 days of Yangzhou. Before I came to Yangzhou, I'd read about this history in books. In 1645, when Qing troops came south, Yangzhou's defending General Shi Kaifa led a resistance that held for 7 days and 7 nights. When the city fell, Shi Kaifa was captured. He chose death over surrender and was killed by the Qing soldiers. After entering the city, the army slaughtered the population for 10 days. History calls it the 10 days of Yangzhou. How many people died in those 10 days? The histories record it. Some say several 100,000, others say 800,000 or more. Wang Xiuqu's Diary of the 10 Days of Yangzhou documented those days. Corpses piled in the streets and alleys. The moat water stained red. The cries of infants continuing all night long.
I'd read all this in books. But the words in a book and the earth under your feet are two different things. Yangzhou's old city was where the massacre happened. Dongguan Street, where I was staying, was in the old city. That means underneath the flagstone streets I walked every day, more than 300 years ago, tens of thousands of dead had lain. Lao Qian told me a story passed down in his family.
He said his great-grandfather's generation, in the early years of the Republic, Dongguan Street was having its sewers renovated. Workers dug down 2 meters at the center of the street and couldn't go any further. Underneath was a layer upon layer of white bones, a vast expanse of white, packed like bricks, covering the entire bottom of the street. The workers were terrified and reported it to the authorities. Officials came to look and after seeing it only said, left over from a previous dynasty. Bury it deeper. Don't touch it. Then they had the earth filled back in and pressed another layer of crushed brick on top, sealing those bones eternally beneath the street.
Tell me, how many people do you think are buried down there? Lao Qian asked me.
I couldn't answer.
After Shi Kaifa died for his country, Lao Qian continued, the people of Yangzhou buried him at Plum Blossom Ridge, where the Shigong Shrine is now. But that grave at Plum Blossom Ridge is a cenotaph. When he died, his body was chopped to pieces by the Qing soldiers and couldn't be recovered whole. The people of Yangzhou could only gather his clothes and hat, bury an empty grave, and pay respects year after year. Think about it. A city that buried its defender in an empty grave, and buried its entire population as bricks under the street. How heavy must the resentment be under this city? Then what does that have to do with Emperor Yang of Sui's Leitang? I asked again. Lao Qian said, it's not connected. What's connected is the earth's energy. This place, Yangzhou, from the Han Dynasty onward was the fiefdom of princes. In the Sui Dynasty it was an emperor's pleasure palace. In the Ming Dynasty it was the center of grain transport. And in 1645 it suffered a massacre, layer upon layer of dead, layer upon layer of burials, nearly 2,000 years of it now. This earth energy, it's like water. Wherever the soil is deep, it seeps there. The soil at Leitang is deep, and the soil of the old city is deep too. You living in this old residence, hearing the sound of stone chiseling. That's not strange.
He paused, then said, what's strange is? What?
What's strange is, it's knocking on this house where you're staying. Underneath this house is the old foundation of a salt merchant, and under that foundation there are even older things. When Lao Qian's ancestors served as gatekeepers for the main family, they heard the master say one thing, that this house's foundation was built over an old river channel. The old channel was filled in long ago, more than 1,000 years now.
More than 1,000 years?
Yes, a river channel from the Sui Dynasty.
Suddenly I understood something, but I didn't dare think any further.
A river channel from over 1,000 years ago. Emperor Yang of Sui made 3 trips to Jiangdu, all by canal. And this house was built over an old Sui Dynasty river channel.
That night, I heard the sound of stone chiseling again. This time, I couldn't hold back. I didn't answer it. But I put on my shoes, tiptoed downstairs, walked into the courtyard, crouched beside the well covered with a stone slab, and pressed my ear against the well's rim. The well was very still. As still as a dry well. But, very, very far down, I heard the sound of water. Splash, splash, over and over, like an invisible river flowing beneath the bottom of the well. And mixed in with the water sound, there was another sound. Like someone on the other side of the river, calling a person's name. After that, I started researching.
I asked someone in my unit's reference room to borrow a photocopy of the Yangzhou Prefecture Gazetteer from the city library, and I also tracked down a few books on Yangzhou's historical anecdotes, flipping through them page by page. I wanted to figure out one thing: what exactly was underneath this house I was living in. According to the Gazetteer, the Dongguan Street area had been a salt merchant enclave during the Ming and Qing dynasties. The salt merchants were rich and their residences were built deep. Front halls, rear courtyards, hidden walls, cellars, and some even had secret channels built all the way to the canal, used for, in the book's original words, avoiding fire and hiding goods. That the salt merchants' houses in Yangzhou had hidden rooms and tunnels was no secret in old Yangzhou. The big gardens like Yuwen and Yuan all had waterways connecting underneath, leading out to the canal, undetectable by anyone. The house I was living in had formerly been the residence of the salt merchant Zhou family. The Zhous were salt merchants from the Qianlong era, with wealth beyond measure, known as Zhou Half-City. The Gazetteer recorded that the Zhou residence fronted Dongguan Street, backed onto the ancient canal, drew water into the garden, and connected to a hidden channel over a li long. The ancient canal, that was a branch of the old waterway dug during the Sui Dynasty. In other words, beneath the house I was living in, there really was an old Sui Dynasty riverbed, and there was a hidden channel leading out from under the house all the way to the river. Hidden channel. Sui Dynasty riverbed. The sound of chiseling stone. The sound of water at the bottom of the well.
I tried to string these clues together, but couldn't form a complete answer. The only thing I could be certain of was that beneath this house, there really was a large space I knew nothing about.
I went to research Leitang next. According to the books, Leitang was northwest of Yangzhou City, and Emperor Yang of Sui was buried there. During the Tang Dynasty, the Yangzhou governor's office built an Emperor Yang shrine beside Leitang, and its incense burned strong. By the Song Dynasty, the shrine was destroyed, and the tomb gradually lost all trace. In the Ming Dynasty, people still remembered where Leitang was, and erected a stele. In the Qing Dynasty, Ruan Yuan did textual research and re-erected the stele and repaired the tomb. But whether that tomb Ruan Yuan repaired was actually Emperor Yang's real tomb has been debated through the ages. Some said Emperor Yang's real tomb was in Huaisi, which was exactly the place where old Qian had uncovered the vaulted top during dredging. Others said Leitang was only a cenotaph, and his real body had long since been secretly moved away by Tang Dynasty people. And some said something even stranger, that inside Emperor Yang's coffin, besides his bones, there was a burial object. A treasure he had kept by his side day and night in the Jiangdu Palace, which Empress Xiao had personally placed in the coffin when she prepared his body for burial. What that thing was, no one could say clearly. All they knew was that it was worth more than a city, enough to match half the realm.
What the books had to say ended there. But what old Qian had told me was still going on. One evening in mid-June, I was soaking in the bathhouse at the mouth of the alley when I ran into an old neighbor from the next lane over. His surname was Sun, everyone called him Uncle Sunday. He was over 60, used to drive a cab, and worked the night shift his whole career. The bathhouse was thick with steam. The two of us sat soaking in the pool, chatting about this and that. Somehow the conversation drifted to old stories about Yangzhou. Uncle Sun said that in all his years driving at night, he'd run into all kinds of strange things, but two of them he remembered for the rest of his life. The first was in the winter of 1993.
That night, a little after 2, Uncle Sun said, I was waiting for fares at the Dongguan Street corner. It was cold, no one on the street. I was just thinking about calling it a night and heading home when the back door suddenly opened and someone got in. I turned around and saw an old woman, wearing a blue cloth jacket, hair combed perfectly smooth, no expression on her face. I asked where she wanted to go. She said, "Take me to Leitang." Leitang? I was startled. That's over 10 li away. I know, Uncle Sun said. But once the old lady was in the car, I couldn't very well kick her out. So I drove her there. Not a single word the whole way. When we got to Leitang, I said we'd arrived. She handed me a 10 yuan bill, got out of the car, and walked toward that pitch-black locust grove by the pond. I was young back then, and I didn't think much of it. I turned the car around and drove back.
The next morning, Uncle Sun's voice dropped. When I was cleaning out the car, I found a 10 yuan bill on the back seat. But that bill wasn't renminbi, it was an underworld note, printed on yellow paper, with Bank of the Underworld stamped on it. I thought of that old woman from the night before, and my whole back broke out in cold sweat. But the strange thing was, I'd searched that car top to bottom. That 10 yuan bill was definitely the one she'd pulled out of her handkerchief when she got in. I took it with my own hands. How could it have turned into ghost money by morning? Who was that old woman? I asked.
Don't know, Uncle Sun said. Later I mentioned it to a fellow driver. An old hand said he'd also picked up an old woman and taken her to Leitang back in the 80s. Also at night. Also in a blue cloth jacket. Also got out and walked into the locust grove. He said that old woman might have been the keeper of the Yangdi temple by the pond. She died in the temple before liberation, and no one claimed the body, so she was buried by the pond. Every few years, she comes back to Leitang for a look.
A look at what?
At her temple, Uncle Sun said. And at that grave. Emperor Yang of Sui's grave.
The second thing was in the summer of 1997.
That evening, Uncle Sun picked up a passenger at the gate of Slender West Lake. A middle-aged man, dressed clean and neat, looked like some kind of cadre. The passenger said he wanted to go to 5 Pavilion Bridge. Uncle Sun said the bridge was inside the park, and cars couldn't go in. The man said, "Fine, just wait for me at the park gate. I'll go in for a quick look and come right out."
So he went in, Uncle Sun said. I waited about 15 minutes. He came out looking pale as a sheet, didn't say a word, got in the car, and said, "Go." Daye Temple.
When we got to Daye Temple, he went in again. This time he was faster. He came out in 10 minutes. When he came out, he was holding a bundle of incense, already lit. He held the incense in both hands, stood at the entrance of Daye Temple, and faced the direction of Slender West Lake. He bowed 3 times. Then he stuck the incense into a crack in the stone by the gate, turned to me and said, "Master, take me back to the city. I'm not staying here." I asked what had happened. He was silent for a long time. Then he said one thing. Someone in the arch of 5 Pavilion Bridge was calling my name.
When Uncle Sun got to this point, he sat soaking in the pool and didn't make a sound for a long time.
What happened after that? I asked. After that, he left. I never saw him again, Uncle Sun said. To this day I still don't understand how someone could call him from inside that bridge arch. But the incense was real. I watched him stick it in with my own eyes. After he stuck it in, his hands kept shaking.
I was soaking in the hot water, but I felt a chill run down my back again and again. I thought of the footsteps I'd heard under 5 Pavilion Bridge a month ago. I thought of the white mist beside the bridge railing. I thought of what the boatwoman had said. A bridge is for people to cross. It's also for other things to cross.
Uncle Sun, I said, who do you think was calling him from inside that bridge arch?
Uncle Sun looked at me and said, "Young man, 5 Pavilion Bridge has 15 arches. On a full moon, each of the 15 arches reflects a moon. But do you know what the old folks in Yangzhou say? Those 15 arches are 15 doors. The moon is the key. When the doors open, the things down below want to come up."
Come up for what? Come up to find what they never found back then, Uncle Sun said. Or to find the ones they never managed to take with them.
What Uncle Sun said had me turning it over in my mind for days. During that time, I went to bed later and later each night, always hoping to hear that stone chipping sound one more time. But strangely enough, ever since I'd heard the water sound by the well, that noise had stopped coming. The house was quiet, so quiet it left a hollow feeling in your chest. One weekend in July, old Qian went to visit relatives in the countryside and would be gone for 2 days. Before he left, he warned me, "Don't go rummaging through things in the house. Don't open the upstairs door. Don't lift the well cover." The more he said that, the more I wanted to know what was underneath the house. That afternoon, I was alone in the house, wandering around. I looked through the front hall, the courtyard, the kitchen, the woodshed. In the end, I noticed a blue stone slab in the corner of the kitchen floor. It was bigger than the others, smoother too, and the wear on its edges didn't match the surrounding bricks. It looked like it had been moved aside on a regular basis. I crouched down and tried pushing it. The slab didn't budge. I found a crowbar, wedged it into the seam, and pried hard. The slab let out a crock and one corner lifted, revealing a crack. Underneath was pitch black, and a damp, stale odor wafted up, a water-fishy smell mixed with a trace of incense, exactly the same scent I'd caught on 24 Bridge. I lifted the slab all the way off. Beneath it was a hole, square and neat, just big enough for one person to climb down. The opening was lined with gray bricks, covered in green moss. I leaned in and looked down. It was dark beyond sight, and only a chill air drifted up from the depths. I didn't go down. Standing there at the opening, my legs went a little weak. Old Qian's words came back to me, "Don't go rummaging through things in the house." I hesitated for a long time, but in the end I put the slab back, packed dirt into the seams with the crowbar, and smoothed it over. That night, I slept alone on the second floor, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. Just before midnight, I heard a noise from the kitchen downstairs, like that slab being lifted again. Then, footsteps. Very soft, very slow. Step by step, they went from the kitchen to the courtyard, from the courtyard to the stairway, and then, came up the stairs. The footsteps reached the second-floor door and stopped. I lay in bed, not daring to move, barely even breathing. There was no sound from outside the door, but I knew something was standing there. I could feel it, the way you can feel a needle suspended between your brows. After a long while, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10, the footsteps sounded again. This time, they were going back down. Step by step, back to the kitchen, and then, nothing at all. I kept my eyes open and lay there until dawn. The next morning, I lifted the slab in the kitchen and looked. Around the opening was a ring of wet marks. Fresh wet marks, as if something had just crawled out of the hole, then crawled back in. I put the slab back and stood in the kitchen for a long time. When old Qian came back that afternoon, I asked him, "Old Qian, that hole under your kitchen, where does it go?" Old Qian froze for a moment, then slowly set down what he was holding, looked at me, and said, "You lifted it?" I didn't say anything.
Old Qian let out a sigh and said, "That hole is the underground channel mentioned in the county records. Back then, the salt merchants built it to connect to the canal. After liberation, the government did a survey and found that a section of the channel had collapsed, so they sealed it up. It's been sealed for over 40 years.
But, I said, last night, I heard something come up out of that hole and walk upstairs.
Old Qian was silent for a long time. He lit a cigarette, smoked half of it, and only then said, "What you heard wasn't a person."
Then what was it?
It's the people who built the channel. Old Qian said. The original owner told me this channel was built during the Qianlong era. The masons who built it were sealed inside when they finished. It was the salt merchant's rule. When it comes to a house's hidden passage, no one but the master could know of it. So after the masons finished the channel, the master treated them to a round of drinks. And then, there was no then. This channel was filled with human lives. Those masons, even in death, didn't recognize the way home. So they keep following the channel, walking it over and over, trying to get out of the house.
Walking for 200 years? Walking for 200 years. Old Qian said. They don't know the owners of this house changed long ago. They're still looking for the door from back then.
In August, I took a day off and went to Leitang by myself.
Leitang is northwest of the city. These days it's a big pond, surrounded by newly built roads and housing developments. Not much like the wild pond with locust trees old Qian had described. A cultural relic protection monument stood by the pond, inscribed with the words, "Tomb of Emperor Yang of Sui." Behind the monument was a grave enclosed by gray brick walls, and in front of the grave stood the tombstone bearing Tomb of Emperor Yang of Sui, the one set up by Ruan Yuan in the Qing Dynasty, later re-engraved. I walked a full circle around the grave. It wasn't big, just an ordinary mound of earth wrapped in a brick wall, with a few cypress trees planted around it. It was high noon, sunlight glaring white, but standing in front of the grave I felt cold all over, as if I'd walked into a cellar. There was a small shop beside the grave selling water and tourist souvenirs. The shopkeeper was an old woman in her 70s, a local. I bought a bottle of water and got to chatting, asked her about the grave.
The old woman said, "This one's fake."
I was taken aback. Fake?
The real one isn't here, the old woman said. Old folks all know this grave was built in the Qing Dynasty. What's buried here is clothes and hat, not bones. Emperor Yang of Sui's real grave is over by Huaisi. But that real grave at Huaisi, archaeologists dug it up a few years back. When they opened it up, it was empty too. Nothing inside.
Empty?
Empty. The old woman lowered her voice. There was a coffin, a stone coffin, but inside it, there was only a handful of soil. The bones? Nobody knows. Some say when people in the Tang Dynasty moved the grave, they carried the bones back to Chang'an. Others say Emperor Yang of Sui's bones never left Yangzhou at all. Empress Xiao buried them in secret back then, in a place not even the Tang Emperor knew about. Over 1,000 years now, and no one has ever found it.
Then where do you think the bones are?
The old woman gave me a look, but instead of answering directly, she said, "Young man, have you ever heard of listening to the earth?"
I said no.
Old-timers, when they couldn't sleep at night, would press their ears to the ground and listen, the old woman said. They said there are sounds under the earth. Under Yangzhou City there's a river you can't see, and Emperor Yang's fleet is still sailing on it. Back then he dug canals for 5,000 li and more, also his fleet could go wherever he wanted. When he died, the fleet stopped right beside him. He was a man who never got to set off while he was alive. And now he's dead, he's still sailing the river.
Where is that river?
The old woman shook her head. I don't know. But there's one thing I do know, when you sleep at night, if you hear the sound of water under the ground, don't make a sound. That's his fleet coming. They know the way, better than the living do.
That night, I went back to where I was staying and didn't sleep a wink. I lay flat on the floor of the second floor, pressed my ear against the floorboards, and listened the whole night through.
First nothing. Then in the dead of night, near 3 o'clock, I heard it, the sound of water. Walla, walla, coming from far to near. like a great river flowing right beneath the house. Mixed in with the water was something else. It was the creak of sculls, the work songs of tow trackers, those long, drawn-out calls that rose and fell over the canal hundreds of years ago.
And then, a very, very faint voice, as if someone under the house, through the thick of the foundation, was calling.
Open the door.
After that, I fell ill. It wasn't a serious illness, just a low fever that went down, then came back up, down again, up again. I was dizzy and dazed, and every night I had the same dream. In the dream I stood by a river. The river was wide, the water murky. Dense clusters of boats floated on the surface, sails all lowered, lights burning at bow and stern. The banks were packed with people, all dressed in ancient clothing, their faces impossible to make out. They were waiting for something. I was waiting too. Then the crowd parted, making a path. A figure in a yellow robe came walking across the river. He walked slowly, and with every step the water let out a splash. He reached me, and stopped. I couldn't see his face, only a very bright piece of jade hanging at his waist. He spoke, and his voice was both far and near at once. Has the door opened? I woke up instantly, drenched in cold sweat. That day was a Thursday. I called old Qian and told him I wanted to move out. Old Qian was silent on the other end of the line for a long time, then said, "Move, then. This house can't keep you, and you can't keep it."
But in the end I never did move. My unit sent me to Nanjing on a half-month work trip, and by the time I got back it was already early September. I packed up my things, ready to move. Old Qian helped me carry my luggage downstairs. When we reached the doorway, he suddenly pulled the cloth bundle from his chest and took out the Sui Dynasty Wuzhu coin from inside, handing it to me.
Take it, he said. To settle your nerves. You've lived in my house 4 months, you're the first tenant in decades to last the full 4. Everyone before you never stayed long. Why? I asked. People who don't stay long are the ones who heard sounds they shouldn't have heard, and saw things they shouldn't have seen, Old Qian said. They got scared and ran. You didn't run, you even asked all kinds of questions. You've got nerve, kid, and a hard life. But no matter how hard your life is, you can't hold out against what's underground having its eye on you. Go. And when you go, don't look back. I took the copper coin. In my palm, it was cold as well water. I asked him, Old Qian, you've watched over this house your whole life. Do you know, in the end, what's buried underneath?
Old Qian didn't answer. He stood in the doorway, looking at the daylight in the alley, and only after a long while said, "Before my father died, he told me something. He said that beneath the foundation of this house is buried a character. Wait. Wait for what? He didn't know either. He said that when he was young, he'd also lifted that stone slab, and he'd also gone down into that hidden channel."
He went down? He went down, Old Qian said. He said the channel had no end to it. He walked and walked, and the channel turned into a river. People stood on the banks, boats drifted on the water, and the lamps lit up one by one, like some great celebration. He got scared and crawled back up. After he came back, he sealed the slab shut and never lifted it again in his life. He said that river wasn't the salt-carrying river. It was a river for seeing people off. Seeing who off?
Seeing homeward-bound people off, Old Qian said. Emperor Yang of the Sui built the canal his whole life, and in the end died in a foreign land. The thing he wanted most in his life was to follow his own canal back to Chang'an. But once the canal was finished, he could never go back. That river beneath Yangzhou city, for over 1,000 years now, it's been carrying him home. It's carried him for over 1,000 years, and he still hasn't made it.
Then, has he made it? Old Qian shook his head and said, I don't know. But I do know that if he ever does make it, there won't be another sound from beneath this house again.
Later, I moved out of that old house, stayed in Yangzhou for another 2 years, then got transferred back to Nanjing. In the years after I moved away, I never went back to Dongguan Street. But I always kept an eye on the news from Yangzhou.
In 2013, in Shaozhuang, west of Yangzhou City, an archaeological team excavated 2 tombs dating to the Sui and Tang dynasties. In one of them, a tombstone was unearthed, inscribed with 6 large characters reading Tomb of Emperor Yang of the Sui Dynasty. Inside the tomb was a male skeleton with burial goods including bronze doorknocker ornaments, a jade belt, and a 13-loop golden jade belt of the type called Daye, items that only an emperor could use. Based on these findings, the archaeologists determined that this tomb was the true burial site of Emperor Yang of Sui. When the news broke, it caused a nationwide sensation. That Qing dynasty grave at Leitang was indeed, as the old woman at Leitang had said, a cenotaph containing only clothing and personal effects. And Emperor Yang's actual body had lain in Shaozhuang, west of Yangzhou, for more than 1400 years, until someone finally found it. I watched that news report and sat in front of the television for a long time. I thought of old Qian, of the old woman at Leitang, of Uncle Sun, of the sounds that had come up from beneath the earth on those nights. I thought Emperor Yang has finally been found. Surely now he can go back?
That winter, I went to Yangzhou again. Dongguan Street had already been renovated, turned into a tourist district. The stone-paved road had been relaid, and the old houses had been repainted and hung with lanterns. I found the house where I'd once lived. Its storefront had become a tea house. I went inside and asked the girl working there whether the old man surnamed Qian, the original owner of the house, was still around.
The girl said, Grandpa Qian? He passed away 2 years ago, at 91. He went peacefully.
I was silent for a moment, then asked, in the kitchen of this house, is there a particularly smooth, dark blue stone slab?
The girl froze for a second and said, Oh, that one? When they were renovating, the workers lifted it up and looked. Underneath was a hole, pitch black, no telling where it led. The landlord was worried something might happen, so they had it sealed up.
Sealed up? Sealed up, the girl said. After that, nobody ever lifted it again. But what? But at this tea house, after closing time, people often say they hear noises coming from down below. The girl smiled. Probably rats. Old houses in Yangzhou all have rats.
I didn't tell her it wasn't rats. That night, I found a hotel on Dongguan Street and checked in. In the middle of the night, I woke up. The moonlight outside the window was beautiful, shining on the dark stone slabs of the alley like a layer of frost. I lay in bed when I suddenly heard, from a place very far away, very deep, the sound of water. Voila, voila, like a great river flowing beneath the ground of this city. Within that sound of water, there was no creak of oars, no chanting of trackers' work songs, no shouting at a gate. Only water. Clear and bright, quiet and still, like a river that had finally emptied out. I listened to that water and suddenly felt that it might be his last time passing through Yangzhou. After more than 1400 years, he had finally found his door. The door opened. He left.
The canal is still the same canal. Yangzhou is still the same Yangzhou.
Only beneath the earth, there are no more boats. The story's finished. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.